Derivatives trading involves substantial risk of loss and is not suitable for all investors. Past performance is not necessarily indicative of future results.
Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, May 29th, 2024. My name is John Pieranunzi, and this is the opening swing. Let's begin today, as we always do, with our news. Overnight, we got the Japanese consumer confidence. It came in a bit lower. We also got the German consumer confidence, which came in a bit higher. We also had a lot of German inflation numbers, and as of 5:40, Europe is down around 0.5%. Moving on to the U.S. hours, we got our mortgage apps at 7 a.m. We also have the Richmond Fed at 10, no 8:30 news driver, followed by a few auctions into the afternoon. Then we have Williams speaking at 1:45, our beige book at 2, and then Bostic speaks later on this evening. So that is what we have today. Let's quickly look at the weekly chart. On the weekly, what I've been emphasizing is a few things. Well, I've been emphasizing these 33 halves, this level, which is our former all-time high. What we saw 2 weeks ago, we saw a push through. Then last week we saw an attempted extension, but this week obviously closed in the red, which was significant to me. That I've mentioned that it looks like some of the enthusiasm is cooled, and sellers were starting to get a little bit more interested at these prices, and buyers a bit less interested. So the big thing that we're looking at here is this weekly low, in my opinion. This weekly low and the one time framing on the weekly time frame is vulnerable to a test. I'm looking at this high as a little bit more secure at this point, but that could change very quickly with a settlement above 33.5, and especially with a settle above the 50s, and everything changes. But barring that, I'm looking at this low as a little bit more vulnerable for a test, which would break the one time framing on the weekly time frame. Let's move on to our daily chart. Here's our daily chart. What I've been emphasizing here, many of the same things. Obviously, we have our 33.5 former all-time high area. Then we have this sort of decision zone, the 0575s up to the 49s that we got to, kind of bounced around, made the attempt higher on the 23rd and reverted lower. And I was emphasizing that in this area above these 33 halves, I was seeing it as being resistance, and we saw that play out yesterday. However, we're still above our prior weekly low. So anyway, should we break this low? What's important beneath? These 64s are key, very key. It was a double top, which then we pushed through and extended. So this is the area. The 64s are the area to be tested, in my opinion, on a break of the prior weekly low. Falling through the 64s, should we get there? We have this white line, which is the May VWAP at 44.75. So pretty much for me, if we do get extension, if we do get a break of the weekly low, those are the big areas I'm looking for. 64s for sure. And if we extend through there, I would expect the 50 strike to the 44 halves, that sort of area, which corresponds with this key HVN to be important. And below that, we obviously have our 25s to 33 quarters, which is the next area. But just want to emphasize that as I kind of said in the weekly, I'm looking at this low as potentially vulnerable, and should we fall through, those are the areas I'm interested in. Let's move on to a smaller time frame chart. That's the one we're looking for, 4x5. I'm a little hesitant to pause the video because it's been crashing when I pause, so that's why we're getting this. But anyway, here's our 4x5, which is the chart that I like to look at structure, market structure, and here we see it pretty clearly. This is the area, these 34s to 45s that I was basically saying this is resistance. I'm expecting resistance up here. We have an untested prior week's VPOC at 42, just above. And here we saw the resistance play out. let's kind of remember why. We had this this kind of zipper area, which was the 0575s to 49s. I talked about it a lot. Then Thursday, we got the test through, rejection into extension lower. And then since then, we've kind of just kind of trended back up into this area, but we were through the VPOC of this area, which is down at the 2024s, I believe, right here in this area. Through there, but not to the prior week's VPOC, and we've seen resistance up here, which to me, I've emphasized this looks like a seller or selling interest by a quorum of participants, and on the test, that idea was, credibility was added to that idea, in my opinion. Um, it won't be fully confirmed until, in my opinion, until we get this test, which we may or may not get. But the big thing that I'm looking for here, what I'm looking for on this chart right now, as of today, I mean, the two things that we'll go over, which is basically if we get a higher low versus the prior week's low, a higher low versus the prior week's low, and reversion back into yesterday's RTH range, the prior settle will be the target for me. Alternatively, if we fall below and we test this prior week's low and yesterday's RTH low acts as resistance, the 64s are where I'm looking for. So just in a very general sense today, I'm kind of looking either for some extension to test this area, or I'm looking for reversion back higher into this area. That's pretty much the two things that I'm looking for. And of course, the third thing we can get is just a mess around here. But we'll go over that. Let's do that with a little bit more detail on the smaller time frame charts. And here is our 2x4, also known as the 1x8. And let's discuss some more specific price action here. And I'll begin by discussing the areas that are important. Let me get this chart in a way that we can see what we want to look at here. So what areas are important today? For me, we have yesterday's RTH low, the prior week's low, the 64s, and this area pretty much down to the 50s, below the 50s. Below there, now at this point, this is already too volatile down, so I'm not gonna look below this. For here, we have charts, and we know that if we drop below the 50s, I'm looking for 44 halves, the May VWAP, and below that 25 to 33s. That would be like 2.5 volatile down today, so that would be quite a bit. But anyway, above, we're looking at the 0575 area, 16s, and then this would be my key area on the upside, settlement and our MCV pocket of the region. I'm not expecting price above this today, even on with a strong rally, although it's possible. And if we do get there, then the next thing we're looking at is the 31s to the 33 halves, which I've been talking about for quite some time, and then the 42s to the 42s to the or I'm sorry, the yesterday's full session high, which is 41 up to the 42s, and then the 47 to 52 key region. So these are generally the areas that I'm looking at. We'll go over some bearish ideas first. Okay, pretty bearish stance that we're seeing right now. We're seeing prices pushing lower, sort of looking for buyers. So one way this could play out, we could push, and I'll go through the higher low scenario first. If we get a rounded bottom, like a push through this and some type of a rounded bottom ahead of the open or even during the open, and then we get some type of a reversion higher that is able to hold a low. I'm looking for this to happen ahead if we get this ahead of the prior week's low. If we get some type of basing ahead and then an impulse higher, likely above the 85s, that is able to continue into yesterday's low, then for me that would look like we found buyers. And then I would start to be open to the idea that we get back into this area, back above the 05s, really above Century. And then if we hold above this area, I'm looking for 16s and I'm looking for the prior settle. That's what I'm looking for. That would be above this area, which is 96 to 0575. This is kind of going to be my LIS for bull versus bearish ideas. The alternate case, obviously, is we work, try to base. I would think that if we are going to get the prior weekly low, I think it's less likely that we see any kind of basing. I think we kind of see it, an attempt here, maybe some type of a pullback, and then we just push for the prior week's low. I think if we get the prior week's low today, I think we extend to at least the 75 region, which is about down here. Now, down at the 75s, at that strike, 75s also become vulnerable to a reversion, gets back in the prior week's range, start working higher, looking back for the 86s, which is our key area, and then a potential, this would potentially be happening with a gap open, a gap lower open. So if we get some type of gap lower open, we test the prior week's low but revert above, then we're targeting the prior week's low for gap close. And then, like I said, if we get back in range, we're looking for 05s and then potentially 16s in the prior settle. That's what we're looking for there. What happens if we don't get, if we test the prior week's low and we extend? Well, obviously we're looking for 64s. And I'll tell you that in my opinion, if we get the 64s, like we push straight through to the 64s, it would depend on how it happens up here, but I would not be surprised to see 64s get tested and a quick flush lower to like the 52, 54s, basically this band. Like the 64s are an area that I could see price sort of flushing through and then testing there, testing the 54s. And then I would expect if we do get that flush through to the 50s, into the 50 handle, then I would expect some reversion and support higher from back into the prior week's range. It would probably be a pretty drifty move back higher. So that's essentially the ways that I'm seeing excursion lower happen. These are the areas I'm looking at. We could either get a higher low that then reverts back within the prior day's range, where you get the test of the prior week's low, that tests and then gets back in range and continues, in which case we'd look for 85s up to a gap close for the 96s. Or if we really get extension and we test the 64s, I would be open to 64s getting tested, quick flush through, and then maybe potentially a V bottom that gets back in the prior week's range. And then we'd be looking for tests of the prior week's low again on the way back up and the 85s. So this is generally what I'm looking for, with some kind of push lower from where we are now. And then the big question for me becomes, do we get a higher low versus prior week's low, or do we push to extend? What happens if we just get immediately bullish right now? We could get that, basically the same thing. We get the higher low, but it could just happen around these 86s. Key area here then would be yesterday's low again, where if we get like a higher low, the 85s kind of end up as support. We get back into range. We're looking for 0575s. That holds. Then we're looking for 16s and prior settle. That's what we're looking for. Basically, yeah. Basically, if we can get above yesterday's RTH low and hold 0575s, prior settle. That's what we're looking for. Now, what's the nothing scenario? The nothing scenario would basically be a lot of chop in the areas I mentioned. I think nothing would probably happen with a higher low that then gets up, gets into the prior day's range, maybe to the 0575s, but just becomes a mess in this area. That would end up becoming a more difficult trade because we've made the tests in this area, and then we've made the tests that we want to target, and then kind of nothing else happens. So that would be a less advantageous trade for me, at least. As well, we could sort of see something similar happen where we just get a very quick move to the prior week's low, and then the nothingness happens from about 75s up to 86s. This could also be a nothing scenario that's a little bit more difficult to trade, where we just end up bouncing around in there. But that's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing for today. I think that the bullishness really happens if we get above this 96 to 05 area. This is kind of like the bullish bearish LIS zone for me right here. That's what I'll be looking at. We're basically, if we're holding below, then we're looking for the 86s, the prior week's low, maybe 70s, maybe 74s. We get above this area, we're looking for 16s, and then the prior settle. And if things get really crazy, obviously the RTH high. But that's what I'm looking for today. I think that there is potential for a little bit more interesting of a trade today. We'll see how it goes. We could also just end up getting one of these nothing scenarios, but either way, we got to be ready for everything. That's part of the job. So that's what we got, or that's what I'm thinking for today. I hope that this was beneficial to you guys. I hope that something I said helps you out today. And even if it doesn't, I hope that you find your own way to improve and become a little better today than you were yesterday. And of course, I hope you can make someone else smile today, because that is always the most important thing. That's what I have for you today. I wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.